I was sitting on the porch, the sun setting over the horizon, when my father told me, "You're no longer part of this family." The words hit me like a cold gust of wind, and I remember the chill running through me as if the warmth of the summer evening had suddenly been ripped away. I was 44 years old, and in that moment, I felt like a little girl again, standing in the middle of a storm with no place to hide. It wasn't a sudden blow, not exactly. My father and I had always had our differences, but I never imagined it would come to this. I had spent my entire life in this house, surrounded by memories of love, laughter, and even loss. But none of it mattered now. One sentence, one decision, and it all crumbled to dust. My mother just stood there, silent. She didn't say a word as my father's harsh declaration echoed in the stillness of the evening. She never spoke up when things got difficult. I used to think it was because she didn't know how to fight, but maybe it was just easier for her to stay quiet, to go along with whatever he decided. After all, she had always been the one to clean up the mess, the one who always tried to fix things, even if it meant swallowing her own hurt. I didn't argue. What was the point? I had spent years trying to earn their love, trying to fit into their world, but in the end, it didn't matter. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't the perfect daughter they had hoped for. So, I left. That night, I packed a suitcase, grabbed the few belongings I could carry, and left the house that had been my home for over 4 decades. The weight of the world pressed down on my shoulders as I walked away, unsure of where I would go or what I would do. I just knew I couldn't stay there any longer. It was like I was suffocating, and the only way to breathe was to escape. For the next 3 years, I lived in the shadows. I moved from one place to another, never staying in one spot for too long. I worked odd jobs, met new people, but none of it ever felt like home. I was lost. The world had become a blur of faces and fleeting moments, and I had no one to turn to. It was as if I had become invisible, a ghost wandering in the empty spaces of a life I no longer recognized. I thought about my family often, especially my mother. I missed her. I wanted to believe that somewhere deep down, she still cared. But every time I thought about reaching out, I remembered her silence, her refusal to stand up for me when I needed her the most. And I couldn't bring myself to forgive her. Not yet. Then, one day, 3 years later, I received the call that would change everything. They told me I was dead. It sounded absurd, but the words were clear. My parents had declared me dead. I couldn't understand why, couldn't grasp how it had happened. How could they just erase me like that? The pain of it was suffocating. They had wiped me from their lives as if I had never existed, and now they were telling me I was no longer alive, even in their memories. It was almost too much to bear. But something in me snapped. I had been broken for so long, living in the shadows, forgotten by the world, but this was too much. I had to face them. I had to make them see me, to show them that I was still here, still alive. So, I walked into my own funeral. It was a surreal experience. The room was filled with people, family, friends, acquaintances who had once been part of my life, but now they were strangers. They stood around the casket, whispering in hushed tones, as if mourning the loss of someone they had never truly known. And then I walked in. The room fell silent, the air thick with disbelief. They didn't know what to do, how to react. For a moment, I felt like I was watching a scene unfold in someone else's life. But then I realized this was my life, my truth, and I was finally ready to say what needed to be said. "What's wrong?" Haven't you heard? I'm not dead, I said, my voice steady but thick with emotion. I'm not dead, and I'm not going anywhere. You can't just erase me from your lives like I never mattered. The room was frozen, no one daring to speak. My father's face was a picture of shock and shame, and my mother, who had stood by and let this all happen, was shaking her head as if she couldn't believe her eyes. I'm not the person you wanted me to be, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I know that. But I'm here, and I'm alive. I've been alive all this time, despite everything you've put me through. And now, I'm taking back what you tried to steal from me. Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I wasn't going to let them see me break. Not now. Not after everything. I don't need your approval anymore, I said, looking directly at my father. But I want you to know that I'm okay. I'm more than okay. I've survived without you. And that's something you'll never take away from me. As I turned to leave, I could feel the weight of their stares on my back. The silence in the room was deafening, but in that moment, I didn't care. I had finally said what I needed to say, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was free. I don't know what happened after that, what the consequences were for them, but I wasn't going to wait around to find out. I had lived for so long in the shadows, but now I was stepping into the light. I was alive, and I was going to live my life on my terms. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my own story. The days that followed were a blur. I left the funeral home without a second glance, not caring about the whispers or the shocked expressions that followed me. For the first time in a long while, I felt something akin to peace. It wasn't joy, but it was something real, something I hadn't known in years. I found a small apartment on the outskirts of town. The place wasn't much, but it was mine. I decorated it with the few belongings I had managed to keep over the years, old pictures, a dusty lamp I'd found at a yard sale, and the one thing that had never left me, my mother's silver locket. I hadn't thought about it in a long time, but as soon as I saw it again, it brought back memories of a time when things had been simpler, before the tension, before the brokenness had settled in like an unwelcome guest. But it didn't take long for the reality of what I'd done to sink in. I had walked into my own funeral, confronting a family who had tried to erase me, and now there was no going back. My father hadn't called, not that I expected him to, but my mother, she was different. I knew she was conflicted, torn between the love she had for me and the years of silence that had built walls between us. I didn't reach out to her either. Not yet. I didn't know what to say. How do you bridge that gap? How do you look someone in the eye after they've stood by and let you be cast aside? But it was the phone call that changed everything. It came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The sound of the phone ringing sliced through the quiet of my apartment like a knife. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the caller ID. It was my mother. I stood there for a moment, staring at the screen, unsure whether I should answer. There were so many things I wanted to say to her, so many questions that had built up over the years. But part of me was still so angry, so hurt. Could I really let her back into my life after everything? I pressed the answer button, holding my breath. "Hello?" I said, my voice shaky but steady. There was a long pause before she spoke, her voice softer than I remembered. "Is it really you?" Her words, though simple, broke something inside me. I could hear the uncertainty in her voice, the pain she must have been feeling as she asked that question. I could hear the mother in her, the woman who had always tried to hold everything together, even when it was falling apart. "Yes, it's me," I replied. I'm not dead, Mom. I'm very much alive." I could hear her exhale, a mix of relief and something else, guilt maybe or regret. She didn't speak for a moment, and I knew she was trying to find the right words, the words that could undo the years of distance between us. "I didn't know what to do," she finally said, her voice cracking. "Your father, he was so adamant. He said you couldn't stay here anymore, that you had to go, and I didn't know how to fight him. I didn't know how to fight for you." I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she had hurt me, how much her silence had shattered me, but I didn't. Instead, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Why didn't you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you fight for me, Mom? I was your daughter. You were supposed to protect me." There was another long pause, and then she spoke again, her voice full of sorrow. "I was afraid. I was afraid of losing him. I was afraid of losing everything," she confessed, the weight of her words hanging heavily between us. "But I never wanted to lose you. I never wanted you to feel like you didn't matter." I could feel my anger begin to soften, like a storm starting to pass. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was something else, something that felt a little like hope. "I don't know what to do now, Mom," I said quietly. "I don't know how to fix this." She let out a shaky breath, her words trembling. "I don't know if we can fix it, but I want to try. I know I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt you, but I love you, and I've missed you so much." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to scream that it was too late, that I had been abandoned for too long to just come back and pretend everything could be fixed with a few words. But another part of me, the part that had always longed for her love, wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that there was still a chance for us. "Can we meet?" she asked, her voice tentative. "I'd like to see you, to talk, face to face." I hesitated. The idea of seeing her again, of confronting all those years of pain, was overwhelming. But I knew that if I ever wanted to move forward, I had to face the past. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll meet you, but I need time." I hung up the phone, feeling a mix of emotions flood through me: relief, fear, confusion. I didn't know what to expect when I saw her again, but I knew one thing for sure. This was the first step toward healing, and no matter how painful it might be, I had to take it. The next few days passed in a haze. I found myself pacing the apartment, unsure of what to do with all the thoughts swirling in my mind. I had so many questions, so many things I needed to understand. But I also knew that some questions might never have answers. The day I was supposed to meet my mother arrived, and as I stood in front of the small cafe we had agreed on, I felt my heart pounding in my chest. Would she show up? Would we be able to talk, to truly communicate after everything that had happened? The door opened, and I turned to see her standing there, her face older, lined with the passage of time, but her eyes, the same eyes I had grown up looking into, were filled with something new, something that resembled hope. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel completely alone. The moment she stepped into the cafe, time seemed to slow down. I could see her hesitating at the door, her hands wringing the hem of her coat as she scanned the room. She looked older than I remembered, tired, worn down by life in a way that mirrored the way I felt inside. But there was something else too, something familiar in the way she carried herself, the way she looked at me like I was still her little girl. My heart thudded loudly in my chest as I stood up, my breath catching in my throat. I had no idea what to expect from this meeting, no idea how I was supposed to feel or what I was supposed to say. For so many years, I had lived in the silence of abandonment, in the heavy weight of being forgotten, and now she was standing in front of me, asking for a second chance. Could we really start over? Was it even possible? She took a step forward, her eyes searching mine, and I saw the same flicker of recognition in her face that I felt in my own heart. Slowly, she walked toward me, and when she reached my table, she stopped. There was a long pause as neither of us knew where to begin. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," she said, her words barely above a whisper. "I don't know what else to say. I can't take back what I've done, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded, fighting the lump that had formed there. I wanted to scream at her for all the years of hurt, for all the times I had felt like I didn't matter, like I had been invisible to her. But I also knew that this wasn't the time for that. Not yet. I gestured for her to sit, and she hesitated for only a moment before sliding into the chair across from me. The silence between us was thick, heavy with the weight of everything that had gone unsaid. It felt like we were both afraid to speak, as if any words could shatter the fragile moment we were sharing. Finally, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small photo, handing it to me. "This is from when you were little," she said softly, her voice cracking as she spoke. "You used to love going to the park with me. You always had that big, bright smile on your face." I looked at the photo. It was an old picture of me as a child, no more than 6 or 7 years old, standing in a park with my mother. The sun was shining, and I was holding her hand tightly, looking up at her with a wide grin on my face. It was a time when I didn't know anything about pain, when the world still felt safe, and my mother's love was all that mattered. I felt a tear slip down my cheek as I looked at the image. How had we gotten so far from that? How had things changed so drastically between us? "I remember this day," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I remember feeling safe with you. I remember thinking nothing could ever go wrong." She nodded slowly, her own tears beginning to fall. "I remember it too, and I remember the day it all started to fall apart. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to protect you anymore." I wiped my eyes quickly, taking a deep breath. "Why didn't you try harder, Mom? Why did you let Dad do that? Why did you let him push me out of the house like I was nothing?" Her face crumpled as she buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. I was scared. I was so scared of losing him, of losing everything we had built. But I didn't realize that in trying to hold on to him, I was losing you. I never wanted to hurt you, but I was so afraid, and I didn't know how to fight anymore. I sat back in my chair, feeling a strange mix of anger and sadness. I had always known that my parents' marriage was complicated, but hearing her admit it out loud made it all the more real. She had been trapped in a world of fear, a world where she felt powerless, unable to protect me or stand up for me. For the first time, I saw my mother not just as the woman who had abandoned me, but as a person, a woman who had been broken by her own struggles, someone who had tried her best but had faltered in the process. It didn't excuse what had happened, but it gave me a different perspective. "Do you think we can fix this?" I asked, my voice softer now, the anger subsiding as I looked at her through the haze of my emotions. "Do you think there's any way for us to go back to what we had?" She shook her head slowly, tears streaming down her face. I don't know, sweetie. I don't know if we can go back. I don't think we can ever be the same as we were, but I want to try. I want to make it right. If you'll let me." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words settle over me. Could I really let her back in after everything that had happened? Could I forgive her for the years of pain, for the silence that had swallowed us whole? I didn't have the answers, but in that moment, I realized something important. Maybe it wasn't about going back to the way things were. Maybe it was about moving forward together from this point on. It wouldn't be easy. It would take time, so much time, but it was a start. "I don't know if I can forgive you right now," I said quietly, "but I want to try too. I want to see if we can find our way back to each other. Slowly, one step at a time." She reached across the table, her hand trembling as it touched mine. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance." We sat there in silence for a long time, just holding each other's gaze as the weight of everything we had shared hung in the air. There were still so many questions left unanswered, so many broken pieces of our past to pick up. But for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe we could rebuild, one moment at a time. Days turned into weeks, and as I walked through the city streets, I could feel the weight of what had just begun to shift in my life. The relationship I had with my mother, the one that had felt so fractured for years, was now a fragile thread that hung between us. We were both walking a fine line, trying to find our way through the tangled web of pain, regret, and broken trust. We spoke often now, but it wasn't easy. Our conversations were filled with awkward silences, unsure glances, and the occasional outburst of emotion that felt too big for the moment. Every time I saw her, I could feel the guilt in her eyes, the weight of everything she had put me through. And yet, there was something else there too, a flicker of hope, of longing, as though she was desperate to show me that she wasn't the woman I remembered from all those years ago. I tried. I really did. I tried to see her as she was now and not as the mother who had abandoned me, but it was hard. It was hard because my whole life had been shaped by the absence of her love, by the way she had left me to pick up the pieces alone. And no matter how much I wanted to forgive, there was a part of me that still held on to the anger, still held on to the feeling of being forgotten. It was on one of those quiet afternoons when she called me again. Her voice was soft, hesitant, as if she wasn't sure how I would react. "Sweetheart," she said, "there's something I need to tell you." I knew that tone. It was the same tone she had used when I was a child, the one that signaled something important was coming, something that would change everything. I took a deep breath before responding, trying to steady myself. "What is it, Mom?" She paused for a moment before speaking again, the words tumbling out as though they had been bottled up for too long. "I don't know how to say this, but I've been seeing a counselor, and I've realized something I never understood before, about the choices I made, about what I did to you." I felt a flicker of hope rise in my chest, but I quickly tamped it down. I had been disappointed so many times before, and I wasn't ready to let myself believe this would be different. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice steady, but my heart was racing. "I've been trying to fix myself for so long, but I never understood the damage I caused. I never understood the way my decisions hurt you. I thought I was doing the best I could at the time, but I see now how wrong I was. I see now that I failed you." Her words hung in the air between us, and I didn't know how to react. I had always wondered if she even realized how much she had hurt me, how deeply I had been scarred by her absence, by her inability to protect me. But hearing her finally admit it, finally say that she understood, that was a moment I had never expected. "I know it's too late for many things," she continued, her voice trembling, "but I want you to know that I'm here now. I'm here, and I want to make things right. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. Please, just give me a chance." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. There were so many emotions rushing to the surface, so much pain, so much grief, but also something else, something new. Was it forgiveness? Or was it just the hope that this time she meant it? "I want to believe you," I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. "But I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can trust you again after everything." "I understand," she said, her voice cracking. "I've hurt you in ways I'll never be able to fix, but I swear to you, I'm not going anywhere this time. I'm not leaving you." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. It was as though we both needed time to let the weight of her words settle in, to make sense of what was happening between us. The years of silence, the years of hurt, couldn't be erased in a single conversation. But maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to be. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, something that wasn't defined by the past. The next few days passed in a blur of uncertainty and raw emotion. My mom and I met up more frequently, each time trying to bridge the gap that had once seemed insurmountable. There were moments when it felt like things were slowly falling into place. Moments when we laughed together, when we shared memories of better times, when I could almost convince myself that we had found our way back to each other. But there were also moments when the old pain resurfaced, when I would look at her and wonder if it was too late. I wanted to believe that we could heal, that we could move past the things that had torn us apart. But deep down, I knew that it wasn't going to be easy. There was no quick fix, no magic words that could undo the hurt. And then, one afternoon, as I was preparing to leave her house, I noticed something strange. The envelope. It was sitting on the table, unopened, and yet it had my name on it. "What's this?" I asked, picking it up and turning it over in my hands. My mother looked at it for a moment, her face paling. I didn't want to show you. It's from the lawyers. It's about your father's estate." I froze. The last time I had heard anything about my father's estate was when he had disowned me, when I had been forced to leave the family home. But this felt different. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter that would change everything. It read, "Dear," your name. "We regret to inform you that you have been declared legally dead. As per your father's wishes, you were removed from the family records, and all associated assets have been transferred accordingly. Your father's will stipulates no inheritance for you. We trust this matter is now closed." I stared at the letter in shock. The words seemed to blur in front of my eyes as my world crumbled around me. How could this be? How could they have declared me dead? How could they have erased me from everything? I looked up at my mother, but she was just as stunned as I was. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. I took a deep breath, the anger rising in my chest. "I'm not dead," I said, my voice low and steady. "I'm here, and I'm going to make sure they know it." This was no longer just about healing old wounds. This was about reclaiming my life, my identity, and I wasn't going to let anyone erase me, not my father, not anyone. I stood up, my heart racing with determination. "I'm walking into my own funeral," I whispered to myself, "and what I say next will leave them in tears." The day of the funeral arrived faster than I expected. The air was thick with a sense of finality, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for the past to be buried once and for all. I stood outside the funeral home, feeling a strange mix of emotions swirl inside me: anger, pain, uncertainty, but also something I hadn't felt in years: resolve. I wasn't there to mourn. No, this day wasn't for grief. This day was for reclaiming everything that had been taken from me: the family I had lost, the identity they had stolen, the life they had forced me to walk away from. I had been declared dead, erased, and forgotten. But today, I would walk into that room and remind everyone that I was very much alive. As I walked through the doors of the funeral home, the murmurs of surprise rippled through the room. Faces that I hadn't seen in years, relatives who had once been my family, turned to stare. They had all gathered to say their goodbyes, to honor a memory that no longer existed, and yet here I was, standing before them, the person they had erased. My mother was there, her face pale and trembling. She had been standing at the front, tears in her eyes, as if she had been waiting for me to arrive. But there was no apology in her gaze, only disbelief. I could see the guilt etched in her features, but it was too late for that. The past couldn't be undone. I took a deep breath, stepping forward into the center of the room. The silence that followed was suffocating. It felt like the entire world had paused to witness the moment, to take in the truth that was now standing before them. I didn't look at any of them for too long. I didn't need to. All their faces, the faces of people who had either turned their backs or forgotten about me, were like ghosts to me now. My gaze was fixed on one person, and one person only: my father. He wasn't physically there, but I could feel his presence in the room, in every silent judgment, every unspoken word that hung in the air. I spoke, my voice calm but steady, as if every word had been carefully chosen for this very moment. I know why you're all here. You think I'm dead. You've been told I no longer exist, that I've been erased from the family. You thought you could bury me in the past, but you were wrong. I'm standing here, and I'm alive. I paused for a moment, letting the weight of my words settle over the room. Some faces were filled with shock, some with confusion. But I could see the glimmer of something else in their eyes. Remorse, perhaps, or maybe even a little fear. I'm not the person you thought I was. I'm not the person you abandoned. I'm stronger than you ever gave me credit for. You thought I would break, that I would disappear into the shadows of your memory, but I didn't. I've been living, fighting, surviving, while you carried on with your lives as if nothing had ever happened. Well, I'm here now to remind you that I exist, and I'm here to take back what is mine. I could feel my mother's gaze on me, her hands shaking, but I didn't look at her. This wasn't about her apology, it was about my own reclaiming. I had carried her silence, her absence, for far too long. I'm not here to seek revenge, and I'm not here for your forgiveness. I'm here because I deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged. All those years, I was a ghost to you. But now, you will see me. You will know who I am. The room was still. No one dared speak, no one moved. My words hung in the air like a heavy mist, and in that moment, I knew something had shifted. The past, all of it, the pain, the abandonment, the isolation, was finally being acknowledged. The people who had turned away from me now had to face the truth. And then, after what felt like an eternity, I turned and walked away. I didn't need to say anything more. My presence alone had been enough to shatter the illusion of my death, to force them to confront the reality they had long ignored. As I stepped out into the daylight, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't known in years. The burden of the past, the weight of the family's rejection, had been lifted. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. I could finally move forward. But there was one last thing I needed to do. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. The ringing seemed to stretch on forever until finally, a voice on the other end answered. "Hello?" It was my old friend, someone who had stuck by me all those years ago, before everything had fallen apart. Someone who had never believed the lies. "I'm here," I said simply, my voice full of emotion. "I'm alive, and I'm ready to start over." The relief in her voice was palpable. "I knew you would be. I knew you weren't gone. I'm so proud of you." And in that moment, I realized that maybe this was the beginning of something new. It wasn't the end, not by a long shot. There was still so much more ahead for me, so many roads to travel, so many new beginnings to embrace. I had spent too many years trying to survive, trying to prove my worth to people who never really saw me. But now, I was done. I was done trying to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for me. I was done carrying the weight of someone else's mistakes. Now, I was living for myself, for the person I had always been, the person I had fought so hard to keep alive. And I walked into the future with my head held high. To all of you who may feel invisible, forgotten, or erased, know this: you are not alone. Your story is not over, and you are stronger than you think. No one can take away your worth or your future unless you let them. Stand tall, reclaim what is yours, and never ever let anyone tell you that you're not enough, because you are. You always have been.